Okay.
Welcome everybody to the Cosmic Intelligence Agency's Solstice panel for 2022. The Capricorn Solstice, of course, being a week away, and we will be looking into 2023 as much as we can. This is the first panel. We have another one tomorrow in about, let's say, 21 hours. So if you're not registered, if you're on Zoom, of course, you have the link already. It's the same link, and we will have other presenters tomorrow as well. But today, I have with me some fabulous agents from around the world. I'm just going to start with Armand, because you're in the top here for me. Or you're in the top level. I mean, at the top of the
Yeah, I like the way that sounds. I'm on the top level. Good, yeah.
You're on the top level. Well, you have been a long-term agent, although we haven't seen you for a long time. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, Armand is...
Been out in the cold.
He's been out in the cold. Well, you've been busy, haven't you? Tell us a little bit about your world as an astrologer these days.
Well, yeah, no, I've been an astrologer. I'm seeing clients, writing, doing my stuff, you know, the usual stuff.
The usual stuff, yes. And you are still the president of NCGR, like a big organization?
Yes, yeah, for another 6 weeks, I think. For another 6 weeks.
Right. So you're ending your term. So big shifts for you.
Wrapping it up, going back to civilian life.
Okay.
Is what I'm doing now. Yes.
Right. Well, that's a big job. So well done, agent.
Thank you.
With your work over there. And then we've got Olga Morales, agent 33, who's a fellow astrologer in Melbourne, Australia. Thanks for being with us again, Melbourne, Olga.
My pleasure.
Yes, Olga, many of you know, we have done many recordings over the years together with Cosmic Transmissions, and it's always great to have your input, Olga, because you're an astrologer that looks at things a little bit differently with your kind of techniques and expertise. So we look forward to your input as well.
Thank you.
And all the way in Vancouver, Canada, Rose Marcus, agent 300. Thanks for joining us, Rose.
Hello, hello.
How fabulous. So Rose is a well-known evolutionary astrologer. You've been, I wouldn't even know how many years, many more years than I know that I've been doing astrology. So it's really great to see, have you join us, because you've been reporting on this, let's say, kind of mundane outlook for a long time. Let's say Pluto changing signs. How many times have you seen Pluto change signs as an astrologer?
Oh gosh, I'll have to think about it.
Yeah, right.
1, 2, 3, 3 at least.
Great.
3, 4. I'm Pluto in Leo, so.
Right. Fantastic. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to share my screen. Come on, share screen. And we've got a few slides that we are going to, let's say, look through just to kind of prompt our discussion today. And yes, we are the first panel. The panel tomorrow consists of these astrologers mainly in Europe, with Alex Trenoweth hosting. So that's going to be another great session with a few more agents actually talking about 2023 mostly. But we're going to start by talking about, the solstice. And I think, okay, all right. There was another slide. So what we've got here is, as we understand, when the sun is at 0 Capricorn, that's what the solstice is all about. When the sun ingresses into 0 Capricorn, one of the cardinal points of the zodiac. And of course, it's all, you know, it's been a tradition in astrology to look at these ingress points of 4 times through the year, and especially the 0 Aries ingress to kind of get the flavor of, you know, for the Aries ingress, the year ahead, and then for all the other points like the Capricorn ingress, you know, the next 3 months. So we're predominantly going to be looking at that because let's say 2023 is full of so many changes, but so many happen actually already in the next 3 months, as we'll see. So as we know, when the sun is at its most southern point, it denotes the Capricorn ingress. And, you know, so it's the furthest down south as it is from its summer point, which is 0 Cancer. And if we see it on the wheel, like a lot of people ask me about declination. So as we can see, the sun is at its furthest point from the equator at 23, 26 south. And then it will begin to move north again through Capricorn, Aquarius. And I found this graph that sort of denotes the declinations, declination degrees of the signs. So the sun through the signs or other planets. The sun, of course, this is more about the sun because other planets can be a bit off the ecliptic and therefore their declinations won't be exact like this for the sun. So just keep that in mind. So again, we're celebrating the sun being down south also, although it has been snowing in Australia 1 week from summer. So it's pretty crazy, isn't it? So the Capricorn solstice chart, I've just, let's say, put together a few of the main, you know, the main aspects that we see in this chart at this point. And let's say the major kind of aspect that we see, of course, with the sun, is an exact square to Jupiter at 0 Aries and an exact square to Ceres at 0 Libra. Now, that is quite incredible. I think I would like to ask Armand or any of you how you see this T-square playing out at this point.
Well, you know, yes, you have some positives here. I mean, like, you know, the sun from the northern hemisphere, to be northocentric about things, you have the sun is going to start waxing in the sky. You're going to have more and more of the sun. He's square to Jupiter, which is, they get along well. They're both fiery planets. Jupiter is in Aries, the sign of the sun's exaltation. You know, I mean, on a good day, you could see this as being, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel. That would be a positive.
Yeah, okay, I like that. Yeah, nice. What
on the other hand, you know, Jupiter is in Aries, and that does signify a lot of things, among them war. And seeing this aspect tied in with Ceres on, you know, on the cardinal, not only on the cardinal axis, but, you know, exact at the moment of the solstice. I mean, you know, the sun's disk takes up 30 minutes of arc, right? So we're talking about it being exact at the time of the solstice. And with Ceres tied in there, I mean, I would see this as signaling a pretty, you know, a potentially kind of difficult 3 months.
Yeah. I mean, Rose, you've done a lot of work with Ceres. How do you see Ceres in the picture here?
Well, you know, that's quite interesting. You know, Ceres, I always say Ceres is the goddess of the seasons. And whenever she is animated, she's a revivalist, let me put it that way. You know, so the fact that she is opposing the Jupiter, which is in the sign of Aries, and we still have on this solstice Mars, the dispositor of that Jupiter, in retrograde, and the Venus position in balsamic relationship to Pluto, completing a 1-year cycle of Jupiter-Pluto. I think that this is a very energized aspect here and a suggestion of going to the next level. And whenever she's animated, we're into a next season, right? Of course, here we are at the solstice, but I think about it in terms of chapters, and I think about it as a revitalization archetype here. So I think that this is revitalizing in terms of all Libra dynamics here, that Aries Libra polarity of what I need for myself and what I need from other. We look at the fact that Jupiter is in the sign, just moving into the sign of Aries, and Mars, its dispositor, is still retrograde. I think that this Jupiter Ceres Sun T-square here is animating and energizing, and it is really quite dynamic in terms of the big push. Maybe I'll say that, the big push, right? So whatever the agenda is, whatever it is that I'm determined to solve, to conquer, to break new ground with, I think that this is quite dynamic. I think the first quarter of 2023 is going to be hit the ground running after we get through Mercury retrograde and so on. Once we get to the lunation at the end of January, but I do think that we're getting ready. This is the last leg of the Mars retrograde cycle, and I think it's just kind of like putting fresh fuel in the tank.
Yep. We've had time to kind of rethink things and kind of go for what's most important. And Jupiter at 0 Aries, like we can already feel that let's say revival of uprisings around the world, which we saw when Jupiter entered Aries back in 2011, didn't we? With the Arab Spring uprisings, that was Jupiter into Aries. We know that Ceres has got a lot to do with demonstrations and fighting for the people as well, or, making some kind of negotiations about, what the people need, right? So we're seeing that, in so many places around the world, aren't we? And I mean, with Mars, again, the ruler of, as you said, of Jupiter, finishing its retrograde, but it's opposite the moon. Now, the moon in, mundane charts represents the people. So the natives are restless, very much fighting for the truth that, they need to sort of see, embedded more in their societies, like Iran, for example. That's just incredible what's going on there. I hope it lasts. I hope it breaks through to something. What do you think there?
Well, Jupiter in Aries is certainly about courage, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
So we've got an awful lot more courage. What I mentioned before when the sound quality wasn't good is looking at the dispositor of Ceres, which is Venus in the sign of Capricorn, forming balsamic relationship to Pluto, which is a 1-year transit, right? So
yep.
So this is a finishing off and a seeding for what comes next.
Right. And if we remember, Venus was in this position, or in Capricorn, conjunct Pluto, about to go retrograde at this time last year. And so her retrograde took us into 2022. I always said that, a year that begins with Venus retrograde and ends with Mars retrograde is certainly one that's going to change our value system, somehow big time. So there's kind of like, again, Moon, Mars, there's a fight on somehow, out there, isn't there? Olga, what about yourself? How do you see it?
No, I was just mentioning, because I didn't put Ceres into my charts, and I should have, obviously, because she's the goddess of grain.
Yep.
So the fact that she's on an angle and she's part of the whole, cardinal square, suggests to me that there's going to be issues with supply of wheat and corn. All the commodities will probably be strained because, you know, she's actually, a statue of Ceres is on top of the building of the Chicago Board of Trade. She overlooks it all. So to me, it suggests that, you know, there's going to be maybe higher demands, like less supply and higher prices for our commodities. So that's possibly what's going to happen.
Right. Well, that's always a really good excuse also for putting up prices.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, the energy, the fuel crisis, and so on, which we keep hearing about. Going, really? Prices have got to do with the war in Ukraine. It's quite it's hard to sort of fathom sometimes, isn't it? But we do know that is a really good way to put prices up and you know, claim scarcity for some product. Yeah, but no, that's right. Yeah, so production wise, all that type of stuff. But again, you know, with Jupiter there, it's like, you know, we want the truth behind things. You know, we're really kind of adamant to really and Mars retrograde to really, like, what's behind all of this? What is behind all these decisions that are made for us? That I think we've learned not to trust that so much, you know, like we've learned not to trust what we're told just outright. Overall, there's another big aspect going on with the Sun and Ceres, and then pointing to Uranus, which is what we call the Thor's hammer of you know, the square harmonic, which is probably one of the most intense yods that we kind of recognize in astrology. How do you see the Uranus impact there with Ceres and the Sun? I mean, the Sun in mundane astrology is about leadership, isn't it? It's about who leads the way. Ceres, as we've talked about, production, and Uranus is kind of the new way forward, isn't it? You know, shocks to the system. It just accentuates what we've just said, really, hasn't it? Doesn't it?
Yeah.
What I mean, Uranus has been, you know, mid-Taurus. It's also what we call in a semi-square to Jupiter, which has been an ongoing aspect. And Olga, I know that the 45-degree aspect is important to cosmobiologists and midpoints. Yep. So that has been in effect all year, hasn't it? And we've seen so many, again, like from the truckee, was that this year? The Canadian truckies, was that earlier this year? I've kind of, the last 3 years
yes.
melded
together. The Freedom Convoy was in February and March of this year.
Again, to do with production, supply, you know, Taurus, what we're all fed, what we all need. You know, it's no longer the basics, and how innovative we can be with solving problems in that regard. Yeah. The other thing, the moon, as I said, is in Sag opposite Mars retrograde, but they're both on the fixed stars of Antares and Aldebaran. Do you see that as really accentuating this kind of, you know, I'm just going to call it a battle that we're in?
Yeah. I looked at that too. I've got it in my slides. I think it's amazing that they're lined up, and I've looked back a couple of times, and yeah, definitely aggressive energy. So
yeah, and it's, I mean, you know, Mars is stationing right on Aldebaran, so we've got the three red, you know, the two red stars and the red planet all kind of red. Like, it's just like, I see red, I see red, I see red. You know, this is not this is not a tame sort of next 3 months, really. Armand, what can you say about that?
I think that, I mean, you have to look at that. I mean, like, yes, you do have the fixed stars play in there. You do have the Sun, Ceres, Jupiter, and Uranus on the world axis, right? Because 15 fixed is world axis. Plus, you have the Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars all out of bounds at the solstice.
Yes,
and if you really want to throw in a little bit of extra, like, you know, like we're trying to figure out like what's the process here. And you think about having all of those inner planets out of bounds. I mean, you're really, you know, it doesn't strike me as a particularly rational process that's going on here. I just see that this is being, you know, the folks are just going to be very energized, and maybe Mars retrograde will, maybe it'll kind of pull that back a little bit, and maybe it just sort of intensifies it.
Yeah, I would say it would intensify. I mean, we're moving into Mercury through the Earth signs for 2023. And it's almost like, you know, being, where were they this year? In water? The Mercury retrogrades. Where were they? No, in air signs. Oh, hang on, we have to know that they go backwards. So they're going to fire. They've been in air signs. Sorry, they've been in air signs in 2022. Moving into Earth, it's more like acting purposely to get some result, I think, as opposed to thinking of the ideas behind what to do. So yeah, being much more felt materially. I'd say. So so the moon is also what we call in square or 135 to Eris. Many of you use Eris, perhaps many of you don't, but you know, Eris is another wild card of, you know, speaking up for, you know, what the system is not providing. So here we have, you know, the moon representing the people, and again, the drama or the activation of, you know, standing up for what's, you know, what's important to change the system. So another signature, right? That's quite big. Anyone want to add anything about Eris or the moon in Eris? No? Okay, so yeah, Mercury is stationing retrograde and he's opposite Black Moon Lilith. This is the true node of Black Moon Lilith. So what we know about Black Moon Lilith, it's, you know, and she's in Cancer, is really sort of what do you call it, bubbling up what's deep down inside. And again, not necessarily resentful, but feelings towards, you know, this must be done. So, you know, all of us, I think, are kind of sensing this sort of motion or urge to change something a lot more in our lives somehow. Yeah, I've talked about the Jupiter semi-square Uranus. There's a few quintiles. Mars is quintile Jupiter at this point, which I think is quite, you know, again, bringing in the aspect that, yes, things can be done. We're not moving. We have this hope. We have this, we have this trust that we are moving into, let's say, I mean, we always think this, don't they, that, you know, we're moving into better directions. But overall, how do you guys feel about that? Because we've got a lot of pretty heavy things coming up, or big shifts. Are we feeling kind of hopeful, or look at Armand's face?
It's going to be good, folks. It's going to be, I see this as being too action oriented a chart to look at it as you know, it's positive, it's you know, we're moving forward with things. It looks to me like it's a snap of the status quo, which you could like if you're thinking something better is coming down the pike. Right. But I don't think that is embedded in this chart. I think this is just the snapping of the status quo. Right. Okay, good point. I like that. Yeah. Yeah, the long-term effects we won't really kind of understand or know. But again, I think there's this element of, you know, we are moving towards, you know, the better directions, although it might take, you know, a lot longer. Venus is trine Uranus, again, speaking of that sort of action. You know, the values realigning with change and, you know, wanting to move forward, wanting it to make better for all of us, you know, not just I mean, being in Capricorn, it's interesting that she's there, you know, again, very much about the system that provides for us. Anything to say about Venus trine Uranus and the North Node?
Well, I think that's a positive
Yeah.
for sure, right? You know, so I think we are figuring it out. We're feeling our way along. We might not have all the answers quite yet. I think that this is kind of a stoking chart from
Yeah.
so many different angles here. So it is. I think that this solstice chart is a work in progress, and it is got many moving pieces that are putting themselves into place.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, you know, again, everything that we've talked about, you know, there's a lot of, you know, aspects showing the uprisings that are taking place, you know, moving towards civil rights for the people. We're in the middle of, you know, the ongoing energy crisis, climate crisis, economic crisis. But, you know, the great news that we heard yesterday was that the fusion, you know, experiment for the new energy that, you know, maybe decades away from being implemented has arrived. You know, that's fantastic, isn't it? So, you know, that gives us a lot of hope, you know, for this kind of breakthrough in actually everything that we're having a crisis about. Do you know what I mean? You know, it's going to solve a lot of problems, again, depending on how it's managed and so forth. I was listening, you know, to the news or whatever last night about it. And so as they're saying, you know, this new fusion energy is decades away, but because of the inventiveness and the companies that will escalate this this way of doing things, you know, by funding it and all that kind of stuff, we might see it a lot earlier than they're saying right now. So I've just put together, some of you might not really know, again, for people that are online or watching this, about the geodetic map that we use for understanding, you know, what's going on in the world. Armand, do you use the geodetic map for looking at, you know, just, it's kind of an easier way of looking at the astrocartography, just, you know, knowing where planets are throughout, you know, their cycle, because what we look at is that the Aries point begins at the Greenwich zone, and then 30 degrees across is every sign around the planet. So we've got areas in the world that, you know, are represented by, you know, the Gemini zone or the Leo zone. Like, for instance, in Melbourne, Australia, we're in the Sagittarian zone. And so on. And you can do a lot more work with this. But now that we put the planets that are in the signs along this geodetic map, we have this, you know, quite a quick look into, you know, where and what's going on. And I think the most amazing thing, as Jupiter was at the 0 point of Aries throughout 2022, is that so many things change in England. The government changed 3 or 4 times and the Queen died, you know, and here we have, you know, Jupiter crossing back and forward over the 0 point. We have, what do you call it? We've got the North Node and Uranus. This is the solstice chart, of course, right on the east of the Ukraine and up through Moscow. We have, actually, is this the solstice chart? Sorry. Yes, it is. What else can we see? Anyway, I think the Jupiter, anything you want to add there about this, Armand or Olga? Because I know you look at these charts as well.
I love it. I mean, I like using the geodetic, although you know, that's changed over time what the prime meridian is. Originally, a lot of the astrologers from, you know, back would have been using the Great Pyramid as the prime meridian.
Oh, okay.
Doing these,
right.
yeah. And then at Ptolemy's, when Ptolemy, I think when he was doing all his, he actually used Alexandria for the prime meridian.
Right.
And so it changes where we want to put it. So I suppose using Greenwich now is okay, but if you want to look at historical things, you know, that's the thing. It's really arbitrary what we do, but I still like it for research because we can still look at cycles when the planets have come to that position. Was that country, impacted? Because when I research all Safariel's work and Gant's work, they were using the geodetic placement using Greenwich. So and they made amazing forecasts. So it has a place in our system of of astrology. So it's great.
Yeah, wow. And it is the oldest kind of way of looking at the map, isn't it, as well? So
definitely.
So keep an eye on that. We'll move on. This is now the solstice chart on the astrocartography map. Again, this is now showing the rising and setting of planets and the culminating and anti-culminating points of the planets. And I've just circled a few spots. Now, through the Ukraine, we have Jupiter, the Sun, and Ceres, rising, setting, and all on the angles. Again, that's kind of things have been amplified there, as it seems just recently. We have, what have we got? We've got uprisings. This is where Mars and the Moon are going through, and the what do you call it? The 130 protests going on in Germany. The extreme right wing sort of wanting to bring back the monarchy or something into Germany. That's quite incredible, isn't it?
And it's also, Jules, it's also going through Peru. Peru's having major.
I've got that.
Look at it go through.
Yeah.
That's that meridian. That meridian is hot like that for the next 3 months. That's going to be really
right. So keeping an eye on that. Of course, we've got quite a few things. What is it? Mercury and the Black Moon, Lilith going through Tehran, but also very close to Venus. So kind of all that area of Tehran. People are getting executed there. It's just quite extreme. Beijing as well, the capital of China, that's still ongoing, or I'm sure it's not resolved. And again, we've got Mars and Moon going through there. So it's really telling, this astro map this time. And I really like, having talked about the discovery of the new fusion, nuclear fusion, is right through like the area of San Francisco. We've got the North Node Uranus and Mercury and Black Moon Lilith all connecting in that area. It's quite fascinating, isn't it? So sometimes the cardinal ingress maps, I mean, we follow them throughout the year, and then we follow ingresses of, as Armand you were saying before, you follow the stationing points of planets as well. They're really fascinating to look at. So keep an eye out on this chart, because it's going to keep telling us more, isn't it, throughout the year? I mean, throughout the next 3 months.
One thing I would point out, there is a sun, the sun sets on a line that goes, it is the line that is connecting down. It goes through South America and it comes up. It goes just to the west of Washington, D.C., and then it goes farther to the west of Ottawa, but it goes just to the west of Washington, D.C. And this solstice, if you use the unprecessed tropical chart, the solstice happens 7 days before the last hit of the U.S. Pluto return.
Right.
I don't know. I would just I would just look at that and say, I wouldn't say what's going to happen, but I would say, that's certainly an indication of things happening.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, too, the sun rising off the coast of Japan is a little bit of a, I mean, because of North Korea and if you look at, there's a Ceres line that goes a little to the west of Pyongyang.
Right. Okay. Hang on. I can't find. Oh, here. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Keeping an eye on all of those, and I've just put just some highlights of the Aries ingress that we had in 2022, because again, looking back, we can also see how it's played out as well. And I've just kind of highlighted a few bits here, but something really interesting. I mean, I did talk about, you know, there's Jupiter in the geodetic map at the 0 point here in London or Greenwich. But we've also had the North Node there at the Aries ingress, you know, right on that point. In, you know, Aries ingress 2022, we had the Sun going through Moscow and the east of Ukraine, and Chiron in Aries right through Tehran, just for instance. And interestingly, like this year, we've had a lot of change of leadership and government throughout the world. Like I've listed a few, but probably not all of them. But it was really interesting to look back and go, the Sun line went through Brazil, Australia, South Korea, and Japan, where Shinzo Abe was assassinated. So, you know, again, the place where the Sun was very prominent, we did see big changes come through. So again, keeping an eye on those things as well, and probably more to come. So now, Olga, did you want to sort of, have you got slides, did you say you wanted to share?
Yeah, when it's my turn.
Or you just wanted to go with what we've got here? No?
I've
you
got
have to
my
go.
own.
So let's
No,
see
I don't have to go. I'm just getting a delivery, and I don't know when it's going. It's
well,
going to come.
Okay, all right.
So I might have to disappear for a few minutes,
All right,
but
all right.
I'm okay. Yeah.
So look, we're looking into 2023. We're going to go through this. The agents tomorrow will kind of extrapolate a lot more of this as we go. But, you know, again, we've got a year that starts with Mars retrograde still, a Mercury retrograde, Mars and Mercury retrograde, both together. Saturn moves into Pisces in March, on March the 7th, and is there until right at the end, where he sort of goes back and forward a little bit. Pluto into Aquarius on the 23rd of March till the 11th of June. Rose is going to talk about more of that with us coming up. Jupiter in its move into Aries continues to then conjunct Chiron at 15 Aries, which is at exactly the same time as the Pluto ingress, which is really interesting. And then joins Eris on the 20th of April, and then joins the North Node as he moves into Taurus. So he's kind of doing a lot, you know, in his process. I'm not even talking about the squares or trines or anything that are going on there. And then, of course, the ingress into Taurus on May the 17th. The nodal shift into Aries Libra, again, July. So mid-year, you know, May, June, July is also very shiftable, let's say. The eclipses are moving from Aries. We've got 2 solar in Aries and Libra and 2 lunar in Scorpio and Taurus. Interesting that the lunar is still picking up kind of the last axis, and you know the solar is seeding, you know, this new 18-month cycle of the nodal axis. Venus will retrograde in Leo, and she begins the star point actually squares Uranus, which is really significant. The retrograde begins conjunct Black Moon Lilith and trine to Pluto. So we've got a really kind of big shifting energy. I think, you know, Leo does really represent, again, leadership and those, you know, kind of that we look at, you know, for fame and, you know, glory and all that kind of stuff. Venus stations direct in Leo at 12, Leo square to Jupiter. So, you know, this is quite a dynamic Venus retrograde. Again, already we can see sort of from afar that there's going to be quite a meaningful shift there. And if we think about Venus's last, let's say, star point in Leo, which was 2019, it was the outer conjunction. It was at the time that, what was it? We had, you know, Harvey Weinstein convicted, and all those guys that were playing around a bit too much, doing awful things, very much in the spotlight, right? So that's something to watch with the retrograde there. And then something that's really significant, I think, adding to the flavor of 2023, being, quite dynamic, people standing up for them, uprisings, all that kind of stuff will continue, because the North Node meets Eris in Aries for about 3 months, September, October, and November. So we're kind of going out with a bang as well. And then an interesting conjunction, Mars, the Sun, and Ceres, as Mars starts a new cycle, at 26 Scorpio conjunct Algol. Now, we understand that that's kind of a star that represents also something quite, well, it's that sort of image of off with your head for some reason for somebody. Anyway, these are the eclipses that we have happening in 2023. Again, throughout the year, we'll get more involved with all of them, as they come up. But an interesting thing is that, of course, with eclipses, we need to look back at the Saros cycle of the eclipses, and I've just kind of noted the 20th of April one here, that the last time it happened here was in 2005 at 19 Aries, 11 days earlier on the 8th of April. And then we've got a cycle going back to 87, 69, and 51. It's really interesting because the last Libra star point, which is the first ever in 140 years, was opposite at 29 Libra. So we've talked about that a lot, as though, it has seeded, very much more Libra kind of intentions behind the Venus star. And then if we look at the Metonic cycle, Olga, this is really interesting. It only happens twice, this one. It happened back in 2004, happens this time, and does not happen again. And so I looked up when we had eclipses at 29 Aries, and these are the ones with the red stars are the ones we've had in the last 100 years or so. So there's not been a lot of them. You know what I mean? All these are actually, these other ones at 28, not that makes a big difference, but really there's only been the 2 at 29 Aries just in the last, cycle. Yeah. So this is not a Metonic cycle that goes on for another 5 sort of cycles. So that's really interesting, isn't it? So maybe, Olga, we'll get you to share your screen now, because, oops, I'm just going to stop my share. Any questions, comments anyone has as we are looking into all of this? It's very interesting, though, isn't it? Great to see everyone. Okay.
Can you see my screen?
I can, yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. So from a cosmobiologist point of view, what's happening, because we've got Jupiter at 0 Aries, that's called the world point or the 0 point, and it's really important because it's going to be happening at a Capricorn ingress. So I had to look back, how often does this happen? How often does Jupiter link up with the Capricorn ingress? So of course, when you start looking, you find something, and I did. And I just wanted to point out, if people don't know about the dial, what we call the 90-degree dial, it's based on the 4th harmonic, and anything across the dial has to be 45 degrees apart. So it's either semi-square or a sesquiquadrate. So what's happening for this ingress is so beautifully shown in this chart. And for us as cosmobiologists, we love to look at these, obviously, for our ingresses. Like when I was studying astrology, every ingress we would have meetings and we discuss these charts, obviously, because everything starts at this 0 point. So all the cardinal signs are the first 30 degrees, or the second 30 are all the fixed signs, and the third one are all the mutable signs. So you can see how they all line up. And the fact that the sun is square Jupiter, of course, they're going to come to that 0 degrees of the cardinal signs. And the fact that Uranus is semi-square or sesquiquadrate to the sun, of course, it's going to be across the dial. And this is our 15 degree of the fixed signs. It's one of the most important parts of the chart because it is directly across from the 0 point. Okay, so that 15 degrees is fixed is being called, if you read a lot of the astrology books, the avatar degree, because they believe that people who have that degree can be like an avatar. So, you know, like a world leader, because it's opposite the world point. Okay, but can you see that planets on either side of this, they become part of this whole pattern. In the middle here, this is what we call a tree, a midpoint tree. You can see that Mercury is across the dial to Mars and this moon. That's like a that's an equidistant. So that's a classic midpoint structure. But at the same time, as we've already discussed with Armand, is that they're all out of bounds. And this makes sense when you're looking at these charts, because the cardinal points is like the solstice and the equinoxes. So anything from that, we get what we call antitia and contra-antitia of these points. And the dial shows it the best. So we can see that they're out of bounds. How often do these out of bounds happen? That's another area of research which I've been looking at. I didn't go too much into this one, but I know in 1965 there was exactly the same pattern because I happened to have all those planets out of bounds. So there is a cycle in these planets out of bound and how often they happen. So it's a good way to look at it. Okay. And the other thing is, as Jules already pointed out, is that the Mars is conjunct Aldebaran and opposite the moon, which is conjunct Antares. Where if you read Vivian Robertson's book, it actually says, with Mars, great military preferment with attended by much danger, liable to accidents, fevers, and a violent death. If at the same time the moon is in Antares, which is what we have, especially in an angle, death will come through a stab, blow, or a fall. So, you know, this axis, when we look at it on the world map, can symbolize possibility that something of a violent nature may occur. So if you look at it, actually, I might just, that's better. You can see where the lines go through. We're talking about them already with Jules, because we can see them going through New York and Washington, and the Peru one is going through. So what I've done here, you can on Solar Fire on the world map, put in the stars as well. So the S is Antares and the U on this side is Aldebaran. And I've just put in all I've put in this chart is just the moon and Mars. So you can see those lines going through. If you follow them, with just looking through, it's going through Spain here, parts of South Africa, sorry. And then also, if we go on this line here, it goes through Indonesia and China, Mongolia, so forth. But we also look at the parallel lines. So the parallel lines is where they're angular on the Earth. So what latitude they're at as well. So you can see those lines going through some of these areas. Does that mean that there can be more aggression, violence in those areas? It's just highlighting potential for things. So I thought I'd put that in. New Zealand's right under this happening as well. So I just thought I'd put in that whole, as we're talking about the nature of that military or violence, but I just think the protests that are happening in Peru at the moment are highlighted by this, and that probably will continue. And I just wanted to point out, not that there can be another assassination attempt, because when JFK was assassinated, it was similar pattern, but we had Mercury conjunct Antares. So we've got Mars in Gemini. So this axis is important. And at the same time, they were also out of bounds. So it is a type of energy when there's more potential for aggressive, violent action towards leaders, because they're the ones that are sort of, you know, especially as a world point. Anything with the world point means it's the world at large, that anyone as a public figure as well is more likely to be a target for this energy. So I just thought I'd put that in there as well. So I looked back, I said, okay, when was the last time Jupiter was at 0 Aries at a Capricorn ingress? And this is very specific. And so I found the last time it was there was in 1939. Okay, and this is where it was. So it's actually a consistent 83-year cycle. So I've got software that I can quickly look back, and we can see this is for the Dow Jones, but soon after, this is when the war started. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939. So we're in that zone, and then we go into the 1940s in this area here. Okay, so have a look at it. It's amazing that we have this alignment almost exactly. Now, because it's 83 years, it's almost a revolution of Uranus. So Uranus at the Capricorn ingress was at 18 degrees of Taurus, which is only 3 degrees off the 15 degrees. But when it was the Aries ingress, it was actually exactly at 15 degrees, okay? Interestingly too, Jules, when we just showed me the Metonic cycle, and one of them was on the 19th of April 1939. So this links in with this cycle, and I know why. It's because I'll explain that in a minute. So I find that fascinating that this cycle continues every 83 years, and I kept going back. Okay, now the other thing about Jupiter in Aries, that Jupiter reaches its perihelion when it's in Aries, okay? That means it's the closest to the sun. And that's going to happen on January 20 to 2023 when it's closer to the sun. Now, Jupiter is known to be the influence on the sunspot cycles, okay? And that means that if there's likelihood to have more sunspot activity, which leads to magnetic storms and solar flare eruptions. So what I've done here, I've got sunspot data, and you can see every time Jupiter's in Aries that soon after you get peak in sunspot activity. So this is really important because you can see, actually today there's been a big, or a couple in the last 24 hours, we've had a big solar flare burst, and you know, weather's going crazy all over the world. So I believe that this is a standard, this is a cycle that's known, that people know about. It's been around forever. Even W.D. Gann was tracking all the sunspots. So Jupiter is the biggest planet. It's got the strongest. Imagine it coming closer to the sun and causing the eruptions and more solar flares. So this is important for us, obviously, on many levels. And just for people that don't know, sunspots are related to the flares on the sun, and they create, when a solar flare is directed to the Earth, we get electromagnetic radiation. So there's more likely to have storms. We're going to have you can get the compass go off, radio broadcasts, you won't get them. There's more auroras, obviously. And so, you know, there's a lot of things, and the GPSs can go off. So we're going to, because of this is a phenomena. This is not just us, you know, sort of thinking what could happen. This is actually known. It's a known cycle. So it looks like we are going to have very severe weather still, obviously, continuing and probably getting worse. And the other thing that adds to this is that the Jupiter semi-square Uranus, which is 45 degrees apart, if you read some of the weather forecasting books, it talks about intense cold fronts, higher average precipitation in southern regions, increased sunspot activity, high velocity winds, magnetic disturbances to disrupt wave radios, especially where Uranus is angular in the charts, more so on the lower meridian. So of course, this is like, you know, you have to look at it. I look back to when this last happened, and it was in 1940. We have to look at that ingress. And in January 1940 was the coldest month on record for almost 50 years. And it actually froze the River Thames. And, you know, Jules, you just mentioned it's already snowing in London now. So this is a cycle that's going to repeat. Okay. So, and that was, they're saying that was the coldest after 50 years. So it would be interesting. Can you imagine if the River Thames froze again? Because this is the cycle that's repeating. And also, I looked up extreme solar and geomagnetic storms in 1940. This is a whole article they did, and there were more solar flares, coronal mass ejections. That's what I look at all the time. Sudden commitment. It was crazy. So it's very likely that we're going to have a repeat of this. Okay, so back up your computers and, you know, do all that sort of stuff. Internet banking might go down. All the things we, you know, depend upon in terms of technology are interrupted by these electromagnetic storms. Okay, so this is what I wanted to point out. You see how amazing this cycle is, because it's 83 years. We're anticipating Uranus to be in the same position, and it actually was for the Aries ingress in 1939. Okay, so it's, and look where Mars was. Mars was at 0 Capricorn. And this would have been the ingress that then astrologers would have used to, maybe the good ones, I think they did use it to time the World War II, because this would have been the, you know, because the Aries ingress describes the whole year ahead. Okay, so the fact that Mars was at the 0 Capricorn at the world point, now we've got Jupiter there. Okay. And that's what it looks like just on a standard chart. We can just see how they line up all the time. I think it's an amazing, I just wanted to put it on the map. We can see that Aries ingress, all the areas when the World War II are highlighted in that area of where, you know, it took off. Obviously it was because Hitler invaded Poland, and that whole area was under the lines. And this is not geodetic, this is just celestial normal lines going through there. Okay, and so now the Capricorn ingress, again, there was apparently in 1939, there was a war between Finland and Russia happening, and all those areas are under the lines as well. So, you know, these astrocartography charts can tell you so much about the areas that can be under, you know, the spotlight, as I call it. And also Tokyo, I want to show you, Tokyo is also highlighted in this one, as we saw, but it was also highlighted in 1939. Anyway, I won't go all through the events. People can look back, you know, what was happening in 1940, if you want to get a feel for what can potentially happen in terms of the areas. I just wanted to highlight that the areas that the lines are under were all involved in certain things that were happening. Yeah, okay. Can I think I'm getting my delivery. Can I just stop for a second and I'll come back?
Julia, I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. I was going to tell her to stop the share. Well, let's just, I just find it so interesting to think about, you know, what do you call it? Mercury going retrograde in Earth, the Jupiter sun, you know, Jupiter closest to the Earth, the sun flares. I mean, Jupiter's, if there's going to be something that irritates or you know, grabs the sun, it's going to be Jupiter, isn't it? With his intensity and mass and, you know, what do we call it? Presence in the cosmic sphere. But I remember, however many years ago, you know, when the Icelandic volcano erupted and, you know, put ash everywhere. It was when Mercury just went retrograde in Taurus, and everything, I think it was Taurus, it was May, and the whole, like all of Europe was grounded, couldn't fly. So I'm kind of, you know, like if we're thinking solar flares or something like that, or you know, just kind of that comes to mind for me, you know, with Mercury retrograde in air and Mars, you know, kind of still stationing and all that kind of stuff. Anything you want to add to what Olga just said there?
No.
No.
I can't. I came in with trepidation. Now I'm just scared.
No, we don't want to scare you. We don't want to scare you.
Light at the end of the tunnel. Light at the end of the tunnel.
Agent 33 is always never held back on what she finds, you know.
I'm gonna have to watch the
brilliant
video
astrology.
again.
Yeah. But, you know, that's sort of, you know, kind of, well, agent work, going back and seeing what was happening last time and that kind of thing. I mean, the whole thing is we're already in wars. It's not a world war, but how much more, you know, like it's affecting, as we're told, everybody, you know, with energy or supply. So, you know, I mean, it's I think we're already in it in a sense, you know, what I mean, there are those nuclear threats, you know, from the, you know, North Korea and Putin and, you know, all that kind of stuff around in that kind of way, if that ever eventuates to anything more. Hopefully not, of course.
Well, I mean, it certainly could get worse. I mean, you know, I mean, we are in it, and you know, we have things happening on so many fronts. And I think one thing that, like, even if you look at something like Iran, and when you have a country like that, which is very rigid, and it destabilizes, you know, you tend to get very bad behavior from the governments and so on. And that's the sort of thing that would trigger things. And when you look at the cartography and you look at the aspects and so on, it becomes very concerning because, you know, the more rigid they are, the more problematic they become. And we have a lot, you know, one of the things we did in the last decade was set up a lot of these, you know, rigid strongman kind of regimes. I mean, Iran was already there, but, you know, when we have it, you know, a number of countries in Europe and the Philippines and Brazil, you know, we've really set this stuff up. And when you don't have any flexibility in those countries, and so the only thing they can do is snap. And all these charts definitely seem to be indicating some snaps.
Some snaps. I like that. That's a nice way to use some snaps in the system. Good.
Bloody revolution sounds a little bit heavy for Tuesday night or Wednesday night.
Well, it's like building. The energy's just building. It's you know, we'd have to look, and we'll look through the other ingress charts, and you know, for the Aries ingress, of course, which I haven't looked at much, but just a few days after Pluto goes into Aquarius. So maybe we'll segue to that now, because Rose has to go in you know, half an hour or so. So Pluto in Aquarius, wow, that's a big one. Although there's many ingresses, isn't there? There's a 3 or so back and forward over the next 2 years. So we're getting a little taste, aren't we, just for the next, you know, from just after the Aries ingress, the 23rd of March till early June. Over to you, Rose, because you've put together a good segment for us on this topic. Thank you.
All right. All right. So Pluto in Aquarius, and you can see the dates on the screen, 2023 to 2024. And for the coming year, Pluto will be moving through Aquarius, just 0 degrees there from March 23rd to June 11. So we have a preview or an introduction to Pluto in Aquarius this year. And as you can see on the bottom of the screen here, Pluto will move back into Capricorn from June 11 to January 20th of 2024. It'll be in Aquarius through September 1st, and then it's going to back out one more time and move back into Aquarius on November 19, 2024 to stay there until January of 2044. So that's a very long transit. And Pluto is, of course, 248 years to go around the sun once. And it has been going through the sign of Capricorn since 2008. And what I always say about that transit is that Pluto swings its wrecking ball on any structure, system, consciousness, or reality that has outworn its time has come. Capricorn is the nature of our existing reality, and we have witnessed the intensification of the breakdown of reality as we've known it for the recent past few years. And so here is the ingress, March 23rd of 2023. And Pluto will, as I said a few moments ago, to June 11. It's going to turn retrograde on May 1st. It only goes to 021, and then it's going to back up again. And at the time of the ingress in March, Saturn will have just left Aquarius for Pisces. It does that on the 6th of March. And of course, Saturn is a 2.5-year transit through a sign. Pluto, the setup of the chart, as you can see, with the outer planet cycles here, Saturn and Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, Saturn and, sorry, I meant to say Pluto, Saturn, Pluto, Neptune, Jupiter, and so forth. They're all in opening part of the cycle, the first part of the cycle. And we had quite recently the start of some new synods back there at the start of 2020. We had a new Saturn Jupiter synod, a new Jupiter Pluto synod as well too. And the Jupiter Saturn also too formed a new synod in December of 2020, which was the start of a new 20-year cycle, economic cycle. But it's also the great mutation, Saturn and Jupiter launching into a new roughly 200-year pattern of collective eras. So we see how important this particular time on the planet is. So the Pluto position here, talking more in terms of personal rather than mundane astrology today. From the evolutionary perspective, Pluto represents the soul. It represents the collective soul, represents the generational pull, and it's specific on how it's set up in your chart. For most of the year ahead, Pluto will maintain through finishing off in Capricorn, dipping into Aquarius, back into Capricorn, will maintain a dynamic relationship with the transiting lunar nodes, as you can see on the screen here. When Pluto enters into Aquarius, the nodes will be finishing off their 18-month cycle in Scorpio and Taurus. And for those who don't know, the cycle is an 18-month cycle. The nodes travel backwards, so they start at the 30 degrees, 29 degrees of a sign, and go down to 0. So at 4 degrees, we're a long way through this particular nodal axis that started at the top of last year. And so we're going to experience a nodal shift about halfway through the year. And in terms of understanding that through the eyes of evolutionary astrology, first of all, we correspond, the nodal axis is they're sensitive points, and they correspond to the moon's travel. So the moon is the subjective consciousness, and it is the ego self. It is the lens that the soul puts in the camera in order to observe that which it desires for its evolution. So Pluto represents the soul, and the transiting nodes are the evolution of the ego self, or the subjective self. And so we see with Pluto in square to the nodes, that it really represents crossroads, right? You know, threshold crossing. And you may, I think every single one of us are kind of standing on the threshold of Pluto and Aquarius is a completely reinvented reality. Pluto and Aquarius on the bigger picture theme, climate change, artificial intelligence, space colonization, you know, a complete reinvention of lifestyles and of our reality, again, from the ground up. And Aquarius is also an acceleration archetype. So we will see an acceleration of the changes that are already in the works now. I was thinking about the announcement last night about the fusion, you know, breakthrough, and thinking like, wow, it was so amazing. I have no idea how long they've been working on it to get to this point. You know, it's those things that you know, that you go, wow, this is like suddenly it's here. But in actuality, it's something that's been in the works for a very, very long time. The evolution of our collective consciousness has been in the works for a very long time, 240 years of this particular you know, transit of Pluto through the sign of Capricorn, which reorders existing world reality from the ground up. And we see that in active process right now. But it also ties to the bigger collective, you know, of the ages of man. And I won't get into all of that now, but it's really quite big. Now, when we look at this ingress chart, recognize that Pluto and the South Node are moving away from one another. And so in terms of how I would analyze this chart, I would look at the South Node as an activation point. And in terms of understanding the you know, the toolkit of those nodes, you know, the South Node represents a composite of the past. You know, in terms of that Pluto relative to the South Node, it is activating something. It's in the sign of Scorpio, and Scorpio is an elimination process. The collective soul, your individual soul, is looking to examine, take a deeper look, take a deeper dive into what it is that needs to be eliminated or purged out of the consciousness, out of the system, out of the reality base. And the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio, of course, that's a survival axis, right? And of course, for the past 18 months, while Saturn has been traveling through the sign of Aquarius, you know, it's been the whole experience of COVID on the planet and survival at all the various levels that we've been confronted with over all this period of time. These are fixed signs, and fixed signs are very rooted, or very focused, or very fixated on getting down to the bottom line, right? You know, so this Pluto process, with Pluto moving into Aquarius, is an acceleration of eliminating that which no longer serves. That's part of the agenda of Pluto in Capricorn, and the synods that started Saturn and Pluto will not, they started their synod in the sign of Capricorn, and they will not meet again. Their next synod will be in Pisces, you know, skipping this whole Pluto in Aquarius transit that we're having. So that Scorpio piece, an activation piece, it is meant to uncover, it is meant to mine from all that is sitting there that needs to be mulched or needs to be purged off the system. And the North Node is a resource. It is the toolkit. It is the evolutionary forward. It's the forward piece. And what we have with that North Node, it's Taurus, and it is optimizing for us an evaluation process. Taurus is the archetype of evaluation, and what we are evaluating there is what is essential to our survival, what is of value, what is of worth. And this is a whole agenda that Pluto in Aquarius is meaning to enlighten us with, awaken us towards, and so forth. We see how that is on the move along. And when we, in looking at the Pluto transit for this year, then observing that that Pluto is going to be in square to the nodes for most of the year ahead, it is that suggestion of standing on that critical threshold. And with the nodes, we look to the rulers of the nodes for additional information. And in looking at this ingress chart, we see the position of the North Node ruler, Venus, is in new phase to the North Node. These two have just formed a conjunction quite within just days before. And Venus is also on in a balsamic relationship into culminating right here on Uranus, which is in the sign of Taurus. Uranus in Taurus is 7-year transit through a sign. Again, it is reinventing the nature of our value systems. It's reinventing money, Aquarius, and, we have the crypto industry. We have a whole change in what it is that we value. And all of our survival needs are changing as well, too. So this is a pretty big chart to see from this perspective. Sorry, I wanted to say one other thing here about about this transit as well too, in terms of the the cycles that Pluto is working under. The nodal axis is a 19-year cycle, and Pluto's transit through Aquarius is about 20 years. So the nodal axis is going to go through a complete revolution while Pluto is moving through Aquarius. And every 18 months we get a new kind of subject du jour to work with. There's probably a lot more that I wanted to say about this chart, but I also wanted to point out, which I've written down here at the bottom of the screen, and I think Olga mentioned this, I think Jules mentioned this as well too. There's a super new moon on January 21st, which is at 032 Aquarius. So that's going to be quite a kicker, because Uranus turns stations direct the next day, and Jupiter in Aries is at its perihelion, and so forth. So there's a lot more to say about this chart, but let me move forward here. As I said a moment ago, Pluto will square the nodes within 5 degrees from March until December. If you want to give it larger, you'll see pretty much the whole year. And so I've just taken out everything so that you can see the movement here. Venus has recently formed a new phase conjunction to the North Node. So that is a suggestion of moving into new programming in terms of what it is that has value and meaning to you. Pluto is the ruler of that South Node, and therefore intensifies the soul searching, the deeper dive that we have into the whys and wherefores of why is it happening to me like this? Why am I moving in this direction? Why am I getting these impulses? Why am I in conflict with myself? And so forth. On the other side of the screen, I have the July 17, 2023 date. Now, on May 1st, Pluto will turn retrograde. And on July 17, it will back into back into Capricorn. And when Pluto backs into Capricorn, it's retrograde here in the chart, we'll have a nodal axis switch as well too. So this is the cardinal points are being represented right here with the south node moving into Libra and the north node moving into Aries. And so that's going to punch up then the Aries Libra dynamic. Libra, in terms of the nodal axis, Scorpio Taurus, the ruler of the north node is Venus, and that's the evolutionary forward. It is our optimizing the opportunity for us to reevaluate, and that optimizing is through confronting the existing reality. That's the Scorpio influence, the square of the nodal axis. Once we move to this nodal shift, the south node in Libra, the Venus transit becomes the ruler of the south node rather than the ruler of the north node. So it is taking what we have experienced in this first half of the year, all of the experiential track, all of that evaluation process, and taking it back and reworking with the south node in Libra, how we show up in relationship. And Libra is, the socialized perspective of relationships. So it deals with relationships at the socialized level, and then it is at the personal level, our one-on-one relationships. And we certainly can see, how all of that is being redefined. Quite recently, the announcement for the acceptance in the state of same-sex marriages, for example. Again, this is a movement forward. What I wanted to point out with this bare bones chart here on July 17th is the position of the rulers of the nodes. Venus is in the sign of Leo, and Mars is in the sign of Virgo. Venus and Mars are in a balsamic relationship. Venus and Mars are a 2-year cycle. They started a new relationship cycle in March of this year, connected with Pluto. That was a very long process between middle of February and the beginning of March, when Russia, inch by inch invaded Ukraine. That was at that timetable. And the new cycle with Venus and Mars started at 0 degrees Aquarius. So that 0 degrees Aquarius keeps getting re-stimulated. Venus and Mars on December 1st of 2022 hit the opposition point, which completed the first half of the Venus-Mars cycle, which will go to February of 2025. So we're in an intensification process of working out relationship dynamics. And relationship dynamics I always describe as me to me, me to you, and me to us. So it's at all levels, at the personal level, at the social level, at the collective level. We see this. The position of Venus, the ruler of the south node, is trine to this north node. Mars is in the sign of Virgo, and both Venus and Mars form a quincunx to planet Pluto. So we see that this is, in actuality, it's, let me just go to the next. So a quincunx aspect between these call for an adjustment. So we're in an intensification period. And in the month of July, I believe it is, later on in July, we'll have a Venus retrograde. So Venus in Leo is very important to watch as well, too. Here's the chart with the details filled in. And so I've outlined the yod that takes place with Pluto in retrograde in Capricorn. Pluto, it has been maintaining a sextile to Neptune for quite some time. And the apex of the odd is the rulers of the nodes here, Venus and Pluto. So we are working our way through tremendous amount here in terms of the sorry, I'm distracted by the door ringing and the telephone ringing in the door. This is a point here where we are, working to analyze and make an adjustment regarding, Venus in Leo, our own creative process. Leo is the archetype of creative actualization. How are we actualizing? What is our creative process? And Mars in Virgo suggests that there is a lot of healing to do. There's a lot of work to do, to correct, to fix, to fine tune and improve. This yod, the position of Saturn in the odd is a synthesis point here. It is, what brings everything together. This Saturn in Pisces and its retrograde. Saturn in Pisces dissolves, right? It's a dissolving influence. Saturn in Aquarius is a shattering influence, fracturing influence. Saturn in Pisces is dissolving. It is Saturn in Pisces is, it is a transit of collective and personal disillusionment. Pisces is an archetype of disillusionment. It is, a signature of loss. The Pisces archetype, Saturn in Pisces, is necessary for us to take a look at what our ultimate ideals are, our projection of those ultimate ideals. What is of ultimate value, purpose, and meaning? The Pluto square the nodes in Taurus and Scorpio. We are looking to eliminate and looking to change the programming on exactly that. It's how we have ascribed to, it's the projections of what our ideals are and how we've created the reality from there. Saturn conditions consciousness, and through its various positions and traveling through the signs and so on. While it's going through Pisces, it is about dissolving those ideals. And Pisces is an archetype of relinquish, surrender, and transcend. So there's something to give up here, a shift that takes place. Where I see that this Saturn is really a tool for us to work with is that Pisces is also about potential. Saturn in Pisces is a statement for, making the potential real. And the potentials of Saturn in Pisces are those that are on brew that have not yet surfaced. There's something here that is taking place. So the fish swim in two directions. We have the disillusionment, we have the loss, and collective disillusionment. Pisces is the archetype of collective attunement. And certainly we all feel that. We're disillusioned with our governments, we're disillusioned with life, we're disillusioned with, and so forth and so on. So this is a very interesting, yod that I think is for all of us on a personal note to take a look at that. And let me also point out that this is a new moon as well too in the sign of Cancer. So it's starting a new process here in terms of examining again, what is it that I need for myself, and how am I going to shift my own creative process so that I can create conditions that are going to help me to thrive and not to simply survive. Jupiter is in the sign of Taurus, and increasing that opportunity with Venus. Because Venus is going to take a retrograde, it's going to stay for a very long time. for longer than usual, I meant to say, in the sign of Leo. So when Venus turns retrograde, it is getting back in touch with the heart and center of self, with your heart chakra, with what is in your better interest. So this is a whole evolution that we see taking place in terms of the whole creative process of I am and I deserve. I have so much more to say, but I see that I'm running out of time. On the screen now are the three ingresses of Pluto. March 23rd. Sorry, I've got the wrong chart here. Pluto moves into Aquarius on this date, and looking at the ruler in new phase. I talked about that chart previously. The January 2024, when Pluto moves back into Aquarius, and the nodes are here. Pluto and Mars are in balsamic phase. In each one of these ingresses, Jupiter is in Aries in the first one, Jupiter is in Taurus in the second one, Jupiter is in Gemini in the final entrance into the long haul of Pluto into Aquarius. I think I will perhaps leave it there. I've got quite a lot more material prepared, but maybe I have given you a taster for today.
Oh, thank you so much, Rose. Yeah, that's a big one. Wow, there's a lot to look forward to with that long transit through Aquarius. It's so interesting, isn't it, that we're going to be hitting off the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, you know, from the end of 2020 as well, which is, of course, as we know, a really significant sort of seeding that is now going to be accentuated over the next 2 years, like, you know, sort of amping up and ramping up that conjunction and its meaning for, you know, new big cycle of, you know, in air of, you know, whatever, 180 years. Something really interesting that I noted was that the discovery chart of Pluto has a 5-degree north node in Taurus.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So it's really sort of like when you talked about the, you know, the north node in Taurus and the potential of what the, you know, the ingress is showing. It's actually in his discovery chart as well. So, you know, if we look at Pluto's discovery chart as a, you know, like what's he here for? What's, you know, what's his purpose for our consciousness? It is to really work with the values, the changing values that we need to kind of live by or transform as we go. Yeah,
absolutely. And those that degree is going to be relevant in the eclipses that are coming up for the year.
Yeah. And then, yeah, of course, you know, squaring the nodal axis. It's also interesting. I mean, this nodal shift is like we've got, you know, the south node ruler Mars, you know, and Pluto and Venus, the north node. Then they swap. You know, then we've got Venus as the south node ruler and Mars as the north node ruler. So we've got this transition that, you know, happens. It's quite interesting, isn't it?
And to remember that the south node is really uncovering. That's where the work needs to be done, right? You know, not to avoid that. It is a gravitational pull backwards, but the whole point is that we have unfinished work. And we need to get it out of the way, you know, and this is exactly what we need to target right now.
Yeah, it does really feel like that. We're in this process of eliminating, aren't we? So over the next few months, we've got this kind of opportunity and then, you know, see where that goes. But the square to the nodal axis is intense. Yeah. Just adding to everything that's coming up. So thank you so much, Rose. I know you've got to go, and someone's going to a class of yours in a minute as well. So.
Yeah, I'll be talking more about all of that for the CIA. We're going to do a class in a couple months. Yes.
Yes. So March, I think it's the 16th or 18th. I've got the dates. I'll show in a minute, but yeah, so Rose will be doing a class on this, so extended version of what we saw today, coming up before the ingress. So stay tuned for that. So thanks a lot, Rose, and happy solstice. And it's wonderful to have you as one of our wonderful agents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thanks a lot. All right, any comments, Armand or Olga, in regard to what Rose has just presented for us? No? Okay. Hang on, you've got to unmute yourself, Olga. Armand, yes?
I think Olga was saying something, but she was
No,
muted.
I wasn't listening because I had to attend to something. I apologize.
Okay, all right.
So, yeah.
So do you want to go back to finish what you were doing?
Yeah, if you don't mind,
Sure,
I can do
yeah.
that.
I'm sure everyone would love to, I mean, what you were bringing up, the solar flares, Jupiter and the sun, the Earth transit through Capricorn of Mercury sort of comes to mind at that, it's over that timing, isn't it, as well?
Yep.
Before.
Let me go back to, where am I here? Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, I just want to make it bigger. How do I get rid of that?
It's at the bottom, I think, on
I know the thing it's in the do that. Anyway, I'll just keep going with this anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, I was just highlighting the lines and how accurate these astrocartography charts are when we're looking back as well, so it helps us to forecast in the future, that the lines were going through Finland and Russia, and there was this war between them during the Second World War. So it's amazing that the lines actually go through these countries, okay, and these areas. Now, so then I went back another 83 years because, you want to see this cycle keep working, and it is amazing. You can see how that I went back another 83 years, and that takes us to 1856. Okay, and you can see this is 1939 on this side. I've just set it for London, and this is another previous 83 years, and we go back to 1856, and you can see that the sun square Jupiter in 0 degrees of Aries, and Uranus was in Taurus. It wasn't exactly at 15 degrees, but it would have been in that year, okay? So the flavors of the signs are still there. And look at the nodes, Jules. I know you'd be interested in this, because if you divide 83 years by 18.6, you get 4.5 returns. So the nodes will be opposite one another, but still on the same axis, which means that the eclipses are going to be happening, in the same time, pretty much. So that's what's fascinating about this. So I love it so much now that I've looked at it. And then, of course, I went back and had a look what was happening in 1856. And again, looking into 1857, there were storms. It was called the Great Cold Storm and Great Freeze of 1857. This is in New England, so it's American, but we've still got the same energy of being freezing energy. And I think it's all to do with the extended solar flares, which is a magnetic change on our Earth, and that causes storms, shipwrecks, icy destruction, bit of cold. And in this time, it actually said that it also was they say here, contributed to the influenza outbreak, called one of the greatest epidemics and deaths. So again, if we're looking at this cycle, it seems to be that we're going to have really cold weather, snowy, icy weather. And the other thing that happened in 1857 was there was an earthquake in California at Fort Tejon, I think that's how you pronounce it. And like when I put on the lines, you can see that in New England, where the storms and the freezing was, you can see the lines going through there, but also through California, Los Angeles, and that area where there was an earthquake, a very big earthquakes. I mean, we have so many earthquakes every day. With my research, I just try to do the ones that are either have the biggest impact or over seven points on the Richter scale. And then having a look at this, there was this ingress in 1856, which, you know, I mentioned Tokyo in the current charts, but in 1856, you can see that the ingress was exactly on the IC. And hold on, get that out of the way, on the IC going through Tokyo, and Jupiter was on the descendant. So this is an angular position, which we would call like a parent happening for Japan. So when I put it on the chart, you can see that from that ingress, there was an exact, on the 21st of March, 1857, there was a huge earthquake in Tokyo, Japan. And a lot of people died, unfortunately, but those lines are going straight through there. And also the parent lines were going through there, meaning that it's showing you the angular position of those two planets on the world map. So this is amazing. But look at the date, though. It happened on the 21st of March, which means that was a date when the sun got to 0 degrees of Aries and triggered the Jupiter. So what am I saying? Are we going to expect something pretty major? I think something major will happen on the ingress next year when the Jupiter is triggered again. Whether it's going to be an earthquake in Japan, that's possibly not, but you've got to look at the timing of these quarters, okay? Yeah, and so you can keep doing this. If people want to research it themselves, you can look at historical things, weather patterns, whatever you like, the economy. I don't have enough data to go back in terms of the economy for all these dates, but it goes back to 1773 and 1619, and you can keep going. I went back even to the time of Jesus. You can just keep going. The cycle keep continuing, and it's, you know, it's an area for research. I've just sort of given you a taste of what you can do. But looking now, okay, so we've looked at the past, and I just want to look at what's happening now for us with this ingress. And basically what I've done here, I've just, go back. I've just put on the lines that are important just to minimize the noise, because usually on these charts we put too much information. And the only planets I've put are Jupiter, the nodes, Uranus, the Sun. And that's it. And this is not geodetic. This is actually just the proper positions of where they are. And what we've got to look at is where the parents are. So see how I put an arrow for where the Jupiter and Sun are along this latitude, and also here. And then, no, there isn't one down. Oh yeah, there is one in the south as well. So those lines, see, there's one going right through Brisbane there. So we might have some really, and look on the coast here. So I'd say that we're going to have some pretty awful weather, and that's probably why it's raining all the time for us in Australia. But you can see all the other lines. I've circled the ones that cross on these parent lines, because they would be like a real hot spot for something. I'm not sure what's in here. There might be some small islands just under India here. I'm not sure. But Indonesia's in the spotlight. Tokyo, again, this is what I wanted to show you, is again in the spotlight, okay? Beijing is under the Jupiter's on the IC going right through Beijing. And this crossing here is in Siberia. Now, I know there are a fault line there, so there could be a really big earthquake there again this year. You know, I mean, in the 3 months, if it's supposed to just symbolize the next 3 months, it can be, but you know, if we look at the one that happened in Tokyo, it actually happened on the Aries ingress. So I reckon the Aries ingress is going to be important, because that's when the Jupiter will be triggered again. And then we've got the line coming through Los Angeles and Vancouver and San Francisco. And also there's this cluster here, Newfoundland in Canada. The line also goes through, the sun is on the descendant, as commented on, and it is going through Washington. It's a little bit wide, but it's still there. And we've got a lot going here in Brazil. So they're the areas. This one here, there's a whole lot of little islands in the Pacific. So yeah, they're the main spots I can see in this chart. And just close up, we can see that the lines are going through Russia as well. That's the Jupiter Sun square going through that area. Okay. And if we look at, I've just put some close up. There's a line up also in Houston, Texas here, which seems to be important for that. And through Los Angeles area and San Francisco, we've got the nodes and Uranus rising. So they're angular. And do you remember when I spoke about the weather in that little quote I had, and he wrote that if Uranus in aspect to Jupiter is on an angle, that's where you expect it to have more weather or difficulties with magnetic storms. So, these are areas where we see Uranus anywhere that can have impact on that area. But see how also interesting that we've still got the Moon Mars going through Peru as well in here. That's where we're having all the, at the moment, there's a lot of things happening. The Solomon Islands and Noumea, all these little islands here are pretty much in the spotlight as well. Okay. Another one I sort of stuck out because of it's going on the parens and the lines where it all intersects is Nepal. Parts of India here look like under the influence here. And Japan again is very similar to the one that I showed you when there was a huge earthquake. So this is like, there might be a hot spot there for that activity. And I just mention this quickly because it's on the charts, but these is like, I've just put it up for Washington and for China. They're always in opposition on the world map. And you can see that for Washington, the sun's on the descendant right on it. We've got the, 0 Cancer, 0 Capricorn. So usually descendant is other people, but other nations, like your relationships with other people, other nations, I should say. And the Jupiter's in the 10th house, so the government. It's a bit wide, but it's still there. And for China, it's actually more on the IC, which is the land of people as well. And a wide rising on, the first house. But it's also good to look at where Uranus is in these charts as well, because it's going to cause more, I suppose, on a financial level. There's something to do with, in the 11th house, that has to do with parliaments and legislations and new bills. So there's probably going to be a lot of activity in that area that people won't be too happy about. And for China, it's in the 6th house, which has to do with, health of people, services. So there might be more sickness happening. They've got a huge COVID outbreak at the moment. So I think they'll still be dealing with that into the next quarter. And so with Russia, you can see, again, with Russia, it's right on the IC, and so with Ukraine, because, their meridian is almost similar. So they're going to be this quarter, again, they're going to be in the spotlight as parens. The parens will be going straight through them again. And unfortunately, the Uranus, the semi-square, takes it into the 8th house for both these countries, which has a lot to do with mortality of people. So it doesn't look too good there. And also debt and, financial things, they go, maybe the Ukraine, looking for more funding for the war. But it looks like this will continue with the, Jupiter and Mars wanting the power, the military. So, yeah, that's interesting how it's still lining up for those countries. Oh, sorry. And that's all I've got. So, yeah, it's really significant. alignments, and the charts, the astrocartography of the past are sort of coming in now anyway. So that's it, Jules.
Thank you, Olga. Fantastic, as usual. Always giving us lots of great info and showing us how to do it and what to look for. So yeah, it's pretty dynamic, that's for sure, isn't it?
Yeah, and like the nodes coming in as well on the Libra Aries axis as well, like
yeah, with Pluto squaring.
Yeah.
Wee woo.
Yeah, so it's like I'm pretty rapt that I found this cycle, and I probably wouldn't have looked at it if I hadn't studied, properly. Because when I did this, similar to the one when we had the ingress and Saturn was conjunct the Capricorn ingress and Saturn was conjunct, I did a lot of research on that. And when I looked at it, it went back to the bubonic plague, and I was saying, well, we're probably going to have some sort of virus or plague coming up, and it happened exactly. So this Jupiter one, the fact that it's perihelion, we know that's going to have an impact on our sun, and this is a known cycle.
Yeah.
So you can see the weather already happening as we watching it, because it's already been there. But the fact that it's exactly perihelion on the 20th of January, right in the middle of winter for a lot of places, in the northern hemisphere, it makes sense that looking back at what's happened in the past, that's what's happening now.
And January is also when Earth is closest to the sun as well.
That's right. Yeah, and that's why that it all happens,
So that lineup, wow.
Yeah.
Gosh, I just bought an air conditioner and I haven't used it. I've used the heating instead.
Tell me about it.
A week. So wow, the big freeze. Jesus. Are we going to have a summer? Anyway, I don't think so. I don't think so. Oh my goodness.
No.
Oh wow. Well, thanks so much, Olga. Everyone's saying, appreciate the amazing, work that you're doing. Any comments from you, Armand, about all of that?
It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. We talked so much about the solstice, but I think that it's really like the trigger points. We have that January 20th. Then we have that super new moon on the 21st.
Yeah,
and
wow.
And then Aquarius, which is also the Chinese New Year. It's the new year. Yeah.
Oh. The cat just threw my phone over. That was, we didn't really look as far as the Aries ingress, but when I was looking at the chart for the Pluto ingress on March 23rd, it is 2 days after the Aries ingress.
Yes.
And you see that the sun was at 2 Aries and Mars was at 29 of Gemini, which means that right before the Aries ingress, you have a square there, right, with the sun at the anaretic degree of Pisces.
Yeah.
And I think, oh, geez, that. Then it goes in, and then later on, the next ingress was, or the one after that, was the sun was
sun. Yes, the zero. Zero, of course, but sun was there. Yeah.
You don't really feel you have to wait a lot of time for this, for the triggers to go off on this stuff.
Right. They're just going to continue going, and again, of course, accentuating that seeding point of Jupiter and Saturn, which Julian Venables is going to talk more about in tomorrow's panel. But are you guys happy to be for another 10 minutes or so, just to finish what we had there? Mostly just looking at.
Do I have to stop sharing my screen? Or?
You already have. I overruled.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But Saturn in Pisces, that happens before. We had to have Rose because she had to go, so we're kind of doing a bit back the front. But Saturn in Pisces, now Saturn in Pisces lasts, for the whole 2 years, and then goes back, goes into, what's the next sign? Into Aries, and then back again in February. So that's a really interesting shift, isn't it, as well? I've just put these images together. I know they're a little bit sort of daunting, some of them, but you know, now, Olga, you have Saturn in Pisces. So before we get into it, you're a good model for someone with Saturn in Pisces, because
I know. I am.
Because I
And it's
think-
in my it's in my 7th house. You know, one said, "Oh, your marriage isn't gonna last, and you're never gonna find anybody." Blah 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 blah. And I've been married for like 33 years to the same person, so you know what I mean.
Yeah. And there's something about Saturn in Pisces people, just to start with, which gives us an idea of, you know, they really have their own rules. I have a brother with Saturn in Pisces, and you know, there are no rules. You know, I don't know. I mean, you're maybe not so crazy like that, but it is that energy, isn't it? It's like, I'm going to take the rules that work for me,
That's right.
and make them my own. And I mean, of course, we can see what Olga does with her attention to work into the mysteries. You know, again, we've let's say, I think we're all going to be kind of working on more of what sort of is the undercurrent that drives us in what we believe, in what we can, you know, how we understand reality, you know, again, what's behind it all for all of us. So, you know, I've just picked some of these images. As we know, Pisces is, you know, the most extreme signs. It's got the biggest ups and the biggest downs. So, you know, Saturn there is going to accentuate that. You know, the Pisces extremes in under Saturn's control. You know, again, how you can control that, but Saturn can do that, can't he? He can sort of take in some order from the chaos, as well. You know, stabilizing the footing somehow. We're all going to be somehow wanting to, you know, make things somehow more secure in a time space that doesn't feel that, you know. So what would make us do that somehow? You know, the image of, you know, building like a safe harbor kind of comes to mind, you know, sort of protection against, you know, whatever elements might be coming to us. You know, what lurks underneath, this Banksy image down here, it's a bit spooky, but I just thought it was just so poignant, because it's like the, you know, the Grim Reapers on the river. But you know, looking into that sort of murky water of, you know, what really is underneath a lot of, you know, what we know or don't know, and you know, that kind of stuff will be really much a lot of, you know, attention paid to. And then, you know, the creativity of AI, which is again very Pluto in Aquarius, and we're already seeing, and Neptune in Pisces is not just one thing, but it's just almost like, you know, the work I think we all do is just going to get so much more creative, you know, in whatever levels to help it, you know, to help us along, or you know, anything like that. And then I've always loved this image of, you know, the Grim Reaper on the beach, because we got to remember, you know, how important it is to live, laugh and love along the way, as well, you know, however hard it gets, you know, what's the most important thing. And I think Pisces really sort of brings up, you know, what and who we're connected to, and you know, again, I've got those tarot cards associated with these two ingresses coming up, but I just want your comments on Saturn in Pisces, guys. Just what you're thinking about.
Well, personally for me, on a personal level, I see it like it's me grounding with the Saturn, right? The mysticism of Pisces.
Yeah.
So for me, it's always been exploring the metaphysical things, the astrology, spiritualism, creativity, and that's how I embody that energy, rather than, you know, like scattering and losing myself.
Right.
Saturn can be, you know, I read a lot, I've got all the books, and that helps me connect with the higher consciousness, is Yeah, the high consciousness of of Pisces,
Yeah.
grounding that, and right, like that's who I am. Or else you can go a bit crazy, not grounding it. If you lose yourself in it and it becomes too much.
Yeah.
Plus, I've got other things in my chart, but yeah, I think it can be really beautiful. As you said, it can be a very creative, constructive. So I think we'll get a lot of more people and young people doing really creative, but the mysticism,
And
I think there's going to be
solutions as well, or
I think
inspired from from the mysteries. So we were seeing that already in a way, but it takes precedence. It is a real way to do things.
Yeah, well, I think there's going to be a lot of disclosure. I'm very limited with Pluto going to Aquarius. Not only just the UFO, UAP phenomena that's been around forever, but also a lot about what the secret societies have kept to themselves. I think that we going into the start of what we would call the age of Aquarius, that it's the Great Awakening. So all that stuff that's been hidden, right? Pluto's just going to bring to the surface for everyone to witness and experience.
To experience.
Everyone be part of it, rather than the select few that have held the knowledge for the whole time of the age of Pisces, which was the church, stopping everyone from getting access to the real stuff. Burning down all the libraries and whatever was there and rebuilding. But yes, I think that's what's going to happen. And with this Saturn in Pisces as well, is us connecting to that metaphysical, mystical aspect of ourselves and what's been hidden from us.
But we could see a crackdown on all that too, as well, couldn't we? No, we don't want it coming out. No,
well, that will happen. Yeah, that will happen before. That will happen before, definitely, which is what they're trying to do anyway. And yeah.
Armand, what do you think? How do you see this amazing transit?
It's deep sea diving, right? I mean, it's like, you think about those guys that Saturn is lead, so they put the belts on and they sink down into the water. And I think that's a little bit of what happens with this. Two ways. When you have the planet of structure in the sea, it is a dissolving, right? So it makes it harder to get structures in there. But on the other hand, when you think about Piscean stuff, when you think about spirituality and mysticism and so on, Saturn goes through and kind of culls away things. It's like, you don't have quite that free-for-all that you used to have. It's like, well, what actually works here? What is actually doing stuff for us? I think about things like the institutionalization in one way or another of psychedelic therapy. I think is a very that would be very Saturn and Pisces. Like, okay, how are we going to really do this? That type of thing. So Saturn tends to whittle down the area, and it's hard to whittle down Pisces. It's always like trying to hold on to air, or hold on to water. It's always kind of dissipating anyway. But there is this kind of like, okay, we're going to have to see what really works, what's really there. Sort of take a sort of cold hard look at things. And I. A lot of stuff that you might have, as always with Saturn, a lot of stuff that you might have, sentimental attachment to goes. But on the other hand, what you're left with at the end, something that will something you can take to the bank, so to speak, something that'll work for us.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you. I mean, there's a lot more to say about that, and the guys will, and we will have a session with Lynn Bell next March on this topic. So anyway, keep an eye out on that as well. So now, Olga, you do a lot of the decan work with tarot cards. And so I've put together the decan that represents the first decan of Pisces, which is ruled by Saturn itself. As we can see in the Thoth deck, or Chahote, I'm not sure how to say it. We can see that yes, that deck of cards I love, have had it for a long time. But yeah, you can see it says Saturn in Pisces. And then this is the Rider-Waite deck. So it's not much. It really does say a lot, doesn't it? This card about what's coming up. You know, moving away from how things have always been done, right? Or you know, walking away from things that we're dissatisfied with, or unfulfilled with. So again, these are the things that, you know, we need to work on. Leaving situations behind. I mean, it's pretty intense. But, you know, on the more positive side, starting your own quest, you know, being strong enough or courageous enough to, let's say, move on, in order to find emotional strength, joy, contentment, fulfilling on deeper levels. So these cards are just perfectly kind of suited really to this dynamic. Would you like to add something to that about what you know about this card?
No.
Or these cards? No. Well, tell us a little bit how you work with the decans, because Olga did an amazing workshop for us at our Venus retreat just 2 months ago, on working with astrology and the decans of the rulers of the decans in Chaldean order. That's what particularly use, and you actually use it as a 10-day cycle as well of the sun through the decans to actually be quite a mundane.
Well, yeah, it was used. Well, the late actually, I've got a book here. This is what started my quest.
Right.
I don't know if you can see it. Muriel. It's called Tarot and Astrology.
I ended up
Muriel.
getting it because of after your thing, I had to find out more. So it's
tarot. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
But it was written it was published in 1940. Okay.
Yeah.
And why I got into it was because my mentor, W.D. Gann, if people know, he was a stock market trader. He's got a coded novel and it's called Tunnel Through the Air. And it has, he did everything in code and it has 36 chapters. Okay.
Yeah.
And so, you know, like I'm thinking, okay, 36 chapters. We know what 36 is astrologically. So I started reading Safarial, and they've got a 36-year cycle. They use the decans, and I thought, hey, I've got to research this. But this lady, this Muriel Hasbro, she and her husband had a stock market forecasting newsletter. And she was using the decans, and she's got it. She doesn't really go into all the detail in here how she used it for the stock market, but she's got a whole chapter on it, a little bit talking about, you know, the wars and everything. Anyway, so of course I got interested in it because of that. And the other thing is, she was very well known for forecasting earthquakes, to the point that she was so accurate that they closed her down. The government closed her down.
Right. So if we start predicting earthquakes, we might be closed down.
Yeah, well, that can happen. They don't want me talking about how to forecast. So when in her book, in this book, she tells you to refer to, she found all this information in the book of Tea by the Golden Dawn. All right. So I've got the book here. It's on the ground somewhere. It's this really thick book written by Israel Regaldi, I think his name was, and they got a whole chapter on it. So that's what Aleister Crowley's deck's based on as well, because they're part of the Golden Dawn. So she was using it for the stock market. So we can put it on our charts, which I do. I teach people how to do it on your charts. But it's not just the sun going through 10 days. You can use it for all the planets. So if you've got all the planets going through the decans and what it means, and then you can put the cards up. The cards are so, because it follows a pattern of the Chaldean system, you go from Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon as rulership. There's such a shift when you get, like, for example, this one, Saturn will be there for the first 10 degrees when it's in the first degrees of the next one. The next 10 will be Jupiter. So there's a big shift. The card will look a lot different when it moves into a Jupiter ruled decan to the Saturn one. So you get the hardship, but then you get relief. It's a really good pattern to watch. Okay. Yeah. So that's how I got into it.
Fascinating. I know, quite a few astrologers do that Armand, do you put tarot cards with your astrology at all in any sense?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I've seen this system. I've seen a couple of different systems. What I usually do is just put in addition to transits, I just put them in the 12 cards for the 12 houses as I go around and so on. But I certainly do use tarot both with astrology and by itself.
The symbolism is just so spot on. Anyway, let's move on. Rosie's gone, but I just wanted to show the ingress of Pluto into Aquarius. Of course, Pluto was born an Aquarian at 29 degrees, and the nodes are exactly the same, so realigned. So I just found that that's really, really interesting in a way of, what's propelling us forward, through this Pluto into Aquarius, time frame. So, and Venus, interestingly, is, conjunct, it's an underworld Venus, as we call it, conjunct the sun in Pisces with Saturn right there as well. So that's an interesting thing, especially for Bitcoin and stuff, Olga, as we know, Bitcoin with zero Venus Pisces, I think.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Keeping an eye on that. Anyway, but let's move on. So this is the 5 of Swords now for the first decan of Aquarius, ruled by Venus, where, again, it's a hot spot, that's for sure. So this one's also, again, ruled by Venus, but it's really, sword cards are never quite a lot of fun.
No.
So, the key words: conflict, defeat, disagreements, the person has just had, some kind of battle. And, I think in most of the cards it say he's lost. So it's a loss of trust, respect, falling in dignity. This is what we might see on the world stage with, again, governments and systems, as Pluto is back and forward, from Aquarius to 29, of Capricorn, in this transition time. Empty victories. So again, ruled by Venus, virtues decline, disintegration by corruption, defeat due to pacifism. Whew.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say about these cards?
Yeah, the 5s tend to be the most difficult in the deck, if we look at all the 5s.
Yeah.
And that's because it's connected with the Kabbalah tree, the world, tree, because the 5 links in with Mars when they do their system. So all the 5s are ruled by Mars.
Right.
Even though Venus is a ruler on that, on the actual tree, it's it's actually so I've just had a bit of I'm trying to find the thing, because I've just had I know it's Mars, so all the 5s have got that Mars energy, which is more difficult. Severity. It's the Sephirah called severity that's come to me. Okay. So when they did this system, this system is old.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
They rediscovered it somehow. I don't know how, but it goes all the way back to the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, and where the planets were. The deacons that are involved, the planetary rulers, they have, like, on one side of the tree, it's like like a peaceful one, because we've got Mercy is Jupiter, and the rules the number 3. So it's really, it almost brings in numerology. That's why I love it so much. When I started researching it, that's part of my Saturn in Pisces.
Well,
going into all this.
As we said before, I would love you to do the classic, a similar or something that you did for at our retreat online.
Yeah, sure.
In 2023. So for someone that's more interested in knowing what we're doing here and how to look at the cards and the astrology chart, it's amazingly fascinating. I remember we did it years ago at one of the retreats, but a smaller sort of version.
Yeah, that's when I started. I started looking at it.
My chart in tarot cards. I went, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense as well. So anyway, let's move on. There is, I liked what Sona said about the Eight of Cups that we just saw. I look at the card and see a multiple surge of wealth coming out of the water and the sea. Treasures from, finding something really, from the water, underwater, lost civilizations or something like that as well. As we know, there's so many that are not being looked at because of financial, the amount it costs to take on something like that. But our dear Graham Hancock has a lot of information about that.
Well, I think they're going to discover more ships that have gone underground that that had treasures in them because of that thing. Like, I really think that's going to happen myself.
And there's someone just asking for the title of the book again. So it's Tarot and Astrology.
I've just put it in. I've just put it in.
Okay, sorry,
I'll put in her name.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
And okay, let's move on. I've only got, there's not much to go now. Oh, well, actually, that's it, because tomorrow the next panel is going to do another 2-hour session on extrapolating again more of 2023. Mostly we kind of concentrated on the Capricorn Solstice this time, but for all of you that, again, hearing what we have got coming up at the CIA, and we will have Armand and Olga and Rose as part of the membership webinars that we do. If you join the membership, they're free. You can also join once off as well, so really stay connected on our website. Make sure you're on the email subscriber. So we're starting off next year with Pluto in Aquarius, crossing the Rubicon, with Liz Hathway, an astrologer from the Netherlands who does a lot of research as well, and mundane astrology and psychological astrology. So she'll be on the panel as well tomorrow. On the 9th of Feb, we've got Dreams, Jungian Analysis and Astrology with Christos Arkos, an agent in Greece, who runs a big school there. March the 2nd, it's bigger than all of us, Saturn in Pisces and Pluto in Aquarius with the amazing Lynn Bell. So yeah, I've got the first few scheduled with dates. Pluto in Aquarius with Rose Marcus. So again, more of what we did today. Shamanic astrology with Louise Eddington. And then, a few more topics that we just haven't got the dates for. So astrology and the deacons with Olga, the 12 zodiac signs and the 12 cell salts with Nikki Allison. Also, fascinating sort of way of working with this 12 cell salts that belong in your body. Saturn and Karma with Maurice Fernandez, Embracing Change and the New Dawn, which really suits the energy of next year, with Wendy Stacy. And more. So because it's a solstice and we love people joining the CIA membership, that's how we, let's say, can continue to do what we do, and teach a lot of people, or sometimes I feel as though we're kind of learning so much from each other, because there's a lot of astrologers in our midst and in our membership, and we really appreciate that. Do join us. I know that times are tough, so it's 20% off now for this solstice week. So we love being able to do that, and have more of you sort of take up the goodies that we have to offer. Also remember that we have an amazing Time Lords magazine now. The 5th issue just came out like about a month ago. Subscribe to sort of get that in your inbox. And if you are wanting to write anything for us or submit an article or even advertise, please get in touch. So we look forward to a fantastic year ahead at the CIA. Armand, you will also do something for us as well. We'll get in touch with dates and schedules.
By all means.
By all means. Wonderful. And then we will be working on something quite exciting for gathering agents internationally in Australia over I would say it's 2024 at this stage. So keep an eye out for that. So thanks everyone for being online. Any questions have you seen any questions that need to be answered? No, just good comments. Where did you put the book title, Olga? Someone's asking for it again.
In the webinar chat.
Yeah, okay. Maybe you just wrote it to us, or did you write it to everyone?
No, it's there. You can see it.
Oh, you can see it.
I don't know.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, great. Okay, it's in the webinar chat. So thank you so much. Well, thank you to Rose. Thank you, Armand, for joining us all the way over in New York. Have a wonderful solstice, my friend. It's been a long time, and it's really great to reconnect.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Great, boy. Great stuff.
Great, wonderful. And Olga, of course, thank you so much. You know, your insights are always amazing. So happy solstice, everyone. Be safe, be happy. It's all going to be fine. It's nothing we haven't seen before. Is that right?
The last 2.5 hours notwithstanding, it's all going to be good.
All going to be wonderful. We'll make it work, or we can make it work. Look after each other, look after yourselves, and we'll see you in 2023. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.